leave the jersey in a better place than what you want to, than you receive it in. And I think one of the things I sort of firmly believe in is that as an individual, a lot of us set winning as the goal. And I think those that go the distance, winning is the standard. I immediately saw segregation. Like all the Bulls players would sit at their tables, all the Sharks players would sit at their tables, and was this weird concept for me of like, I thought we like the Springbok family talk ethos.
You start as a nobody, and then sometimes you start in an environment that's very different to the one that you thought it would be. We had media to contend with. Now media is everyone, and everyone's got an opinion, and there's no one braver than someone behind a keyboard.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Our next guest speakers need no introduction, but I'm going to give them one anyways. John Smit is a former Springbok captain, a Rugby World Cup winner, and a Rugby centurion. But I think most impressively, he is a man who voluntarily chose to have managerial oversight of Bucky's Boerter for over 9 years. And joining him is arguably the best wing in South African history, Bryan Habana. A man so competitive, he once raced a cheetah. Most of us would be stoked to win a park run. Bryan looked at the fastest land animal on earth and thought, I'll have a go. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I have to say, Bryan, you look very, very smart today.
Yeah, I do. Hello, everyone. I'm trying to do to John Smit what he did to Paul O'Connell in 2009. Great segue.
Yes. What did you do to Paul O'Connell in 2009?
So obviously we were told don't wear a tie, so Brian's wearing a tie.
Yes.
So I look like the knob. So that's just to start the story. So Paul O'Connell was chosen as captain because he was tall, and the coach wanted a captain that was going to look down on the opposition captain. And so I thought, sure, okay, well, it sounds like a bit of a story, but we need to be ready to combat the story. So the first test in Durban, I had Andy Murray make these special caps for the Lions series, and we got the caps handed out by the previous generation that lost out in '97. And during the game day, I thought, okay, there's only one thing I can do here is to try and unsettle Paul O'Connell, at our home ground in Durban. I made sure that I came in a few minutes early, and then for the warm-up, I wanted to get there early, and I wanted to be in my full number one. So from warm-up, kit, into the change room, put on my number ones, put on my cap. I had a rugby rule book in my hand, and I stood there waiting for like 3 minutes. And Paul obviously came out at the right time, but he thought it was the wrong time. He looked up and he saw me dressed in number ones with a cap, like super prepared, chatting happily to the referee. And he turned around and went back into the tunnel only to ask his manager what he'd gone wrong here. And the manager's like, I don't know what's going on. So we went up 5-0 before we even kicked off.
100%.
Yeah.
Straightly down to that.
I'd say we went up 15-0 before, so I tried to do the same thing today. I need to upstage the Joburgers a little bit.
Fair enough.
It's the same look of panic in your eyes when someone says, have you studied for that exam? And you've just rocked up at school and you haven't studied.
Yeah. Even if there was no exam. 100%. Okay, so John, maybe let me start with you. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and then we can ad-lib as we go. But most of us really just try to survive the first year of any job. You guys have gone from having one cap for the Springboks to well over 100 caps in the course of your career. What actually changes between game number 1 and game number 111? And what does it take to stay relevant and in that team for that long period of time?
Look, I think there's a lot of things change as you go along. I mean, when we first got into camp, and I say we, myself and Devet Berry, we were debutants together in 2000, but we were 1978 babies, so we were turning 22 that year, and so I think I've told the story a few times, but you get into camp for the first time, you get selected, it's super exciting, and there is not a lot of things that by the time you're 22, that are as exciting as seeing your name being read out on a TV to make the Springbok team. And we got into camp at the Beacon Island Plet when SA Rugby still had cash. And the first day you get kit bags and kit and gadgets and watches, and it's like Christmas. It's the most exciting time of your life. But then the work starts, and so we wanted to wake up really early on that second day, get into breakfast at about 6:30. The room's probably half the size. Our team room's notoriously got these round tables where guys will break bread and have breakfast, lunch, and supper. Meal obviously made by a strict dietitian to help the fat boys. And there's 4 guys sitting at the table, probably the most senior guys, all 50 caps plus. And the vets and I dish up, and we sit down at the table, and they go from talking to being quiet. It gets a bit awkward, till eventually one guy says, "Are you lost?" So then we realized we were lost, and we picked up our plates and we sat at another table. I tell the story because you start as a nobody, and then sometimes you start in an environment that's very different to the one that you thought it would be, and then you've got to adapt to that environment, and then you become, we lay in bed that night thinking, okay, well, if we ever do play a couple of caps, we need to try and change the environment to one that's a little bit more, accepting of everyone. And then when you get that opportunity, you actually have to take the responsibility to create an environment that is good for everyone. And sometimes not everyone always buys into that. So your environment changes, your opposition, their level of competitiveness changes. And there's only really one thing that you've got control over, is how you train, how you integrate yourself into the team and the environment, and how you contribute. And I think it's the guys that see that stay in the team a little bit longer. When you really, if you want to swim upstream, you can. And when you get to that 40, 50 caps, you think you're an absolute hero. You think that the coach owes you a favor. You think that you're just going to get selected. You could take that kind of thought process, could lead you into making some very selfish decisions from a behavioral point of view in the environment. And then it's difficult to hit that 100 cap mark.
On your end, first question, did he create that more inclusive environment, or was he talking total shit?
Only for forwards.
I'll tell a story about the backs and the forwards one day. So my story is not too dissimilar. I became a Springbok rugby player before I'd ever played Super Rugby. I was 21 years old. I just got back from the 21 World Cup, so I was a bit of a nobody. Jake White, who'd taken the reins over the Springbok team in 2004 and developed that team into a Tri-Nations winning team in 2004, saw this one youngster that he was sort of grooming. And I'll never forget, I got a call from my dad on the Thursday. I was still driving back from university. I didn't finish my degree. I did start studying. I just didn't finish. Got my doctorate in rugby, hopefully. Walked into the Hotel Crown Plaza in Sandton, and obviously, as a 21-year-old, you're just super excited to be in this. It's a dream. Being at Ellis Park in June 1995 changed the course of my life. To then 8 years later, get the opportunity to be in a Springbok environment. And I'll never forget walking past Percy Montgomery for the very first time. This was one of my heroes that you look up to, and I can come in my casual clothes and, "Hello, Percy." He's like, "Would you like a photo?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is now awkward." I'm like, "No, I'm Bryan." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in the team." "Oh, where are you from?" And that was very much a Monty thing more than anything else. But I think what I was incredibly fortunate to experience, and John sort of alluded to, those that stay on long term create a culture that you really want to achieve. And I think when I got there, the likes of a Percy, a Oosterhunt, a John Smit, Bucky Spuerta were setting a standard that when I got in there, I knew that whatever took me to the point of getting into that environment was something that was not longer good enough to want to stay in that environment. And Jake White always had the saying that leave the jersey in a better place than you receive it in. And I think one of the things I sort of firmly believe in is that as an individual, a lot of us set winning as the goal. And I think those that go the distance, winning is the standard. And when I came into the Springbok environment, the standard was you give everything over and above yourself to make sure that you're contributing to the team more than your individual contribution to yourself. And I was exceptionally fortunate to be in this environment where there was an exclusion, everyone was accepted, but that the standard was the goal. That was not a goal, it was actually the way we lived, which was amazing.
Maybe John, then following on from that, how do you keep that sort of standard and that culture in a team? Obviously you've got a team of elite performing people, some large personalities. when the results, I mean, you've gone through exceptional seasons with the Springboks, you've gone through difficult seasons with the Springboks, particularly in the difficult periods. How do you keep that cohesion and keep that expectation going?
Yeah, I think that is the tricky part. And we've got it right and we've got it wrong over, I guess, a 100-odd test career. And if I think back to that 6 games we lost in 2006, and we had a really good start with Jake. We won the Tri-Nations in 2004. We got close to winning it again in 2005. And then a couple of things happened. We got injuries to Fourie du Preez and Skalkberg, and they were a big part of our team. And I don't think we'd done enough work around who the next generation were, and we probably didn't adapt to that fast enough. One of those results being 49-0 in Australia, that can get you paying attention quite quickly. But when we got there after really, I guess, embedding our relationships with each other and what the team stood for. So in the time of 6 weeks, you can imagine everyone's pointing at everyone. The journalists want to know, has the coach lost the change room? Is the captain too fat and too ginger? Are there too many Sharks players? Obviously, that's never a question. And throughout that time, no one turned on each other in that period, and we managed to, by the skin of our teeth. I mean, you think about the margins. We played the All Blacks at the Royal Bafokeng Stadium, just in the northwest, just outside of Rustenburg. And Jake and I were called into the president of SA Rugby's room, and we'd lost 6 in a row, and he said, look, just to let you know, if you do lose on Saturday to the All Blacks, you're both going to get fired on Monday. It can be quite motivating. And so you walk out there, and Jake says, what do we do this? And I said, well, there's not much we can do. We can't put on the team. And you end up winning a test match by a penalty in the last minute with Andre Pretorius, waiting to kick it. And that gives you an opportunity to go to the World Cup. And so you survive that. It makes you more resilient, and that sort of challenging period adds to your mantle. And I think that helped us in 2007. And then we had this whole refresh with Peter de Villiers, and everyone had a new lease on life and was committed to, making the first Springbok coach of colour a success. And we had 2 incredible years, actually 3 or 4 incredible years. But what we didn't do is we got to 2009, and I think that was probably at our peak. We were probably at our best. And it had almost happened naturally just because of the progress from 2007, and the guys were still hungry, and Peter was giving us this new lease on life. But we didn't do enough to innovate. We didn't change enough, and other teams started to catch up on where we were good and how to combat that from a strategy point of view. We didn't make any mistakes. We just didn't do anything. We didn't have enough artillery, new artillery, to fight in a different war, which was 4 years later, to go back to back. And we made some errors from a selection point of view, by picking Heinrich Brosseau. And then you get knocked out of a World Cup, and you talk about it, 15 years later. But you start to realize it's the nicest journey is attacking that number 1 position. The hardest journey is staying there. And the lessons that you learn from staying there are from the guys that have been there and been knocked off, and what it takes. And more than anything, it takes a really strong culture, and not just a strategy, but a strategy that evolves and adapts to stay ahead of what the curve is. And I don't think we did enough of that in 2011.
I do want to say that John's being extremely humble. Because I think when I got in 2004, I think there was an automatic shift of where the Springboks were in 2003 when we got knocked out of World Cup. And I got in an environment where I'd been at the Bulls, and for me, wanting to play for the Springboks was always the ultimate. And when I actually got into the Springbok camp for the very first time, I immediately saw segregation. Like, all the Bulls players were sitting at their tables, all the Sharks players were sitting at their tables, and was this weird concept for me of, like, I thought we like the Springbok family talk ethos. And in that 2004 to 2007 period, and why I say he's being humble, I think in any successful organization, your leadership taking accountability is incredibly key. And John could have easily, after we won the Tri-Nations in 2004, sit back on his laurels and not want it to be better. But he made a definitive decision to make sure that integration across the group was a key factor of how we continue building each other. And yes, we went through a bit of a slump in 2006, but if him as a leader who was incredibly key in the relationship managing between Jake and the team, because we had this thing, the back of the bus talks. We solved all the world's issues at the back of the bus. and then Percy Montgomery spoke up. But I think that leadership accountability is an unrelenting factor in any success of an organization, of an individual. And John was instrumentally key in managing the relationship because a coach is sometimes crazy in many ways, but the relationship between the management and the players is a really difficult one. And John was able to, in his very unique way, manage sometimes tough, tumultuous relations between players and the management, but also make sure that integration. And he almost made it uncomfortable for us in being comfortable with each other. And I think therein lied, when we did go through that very atrocious dip in 2006, that we were able to still find each other in the build-up to 2007. And I think sometimes you get lost in those stories of, all that. But if it wasn't for him, I would honestly say 2007 wouldn't have happened because the leadership would have been extremely unstable because of the inter-province rivalry.
It was a big thing. Like, that was the thing that I was most disappointed with about as well. You get in there and you've got all these challenges, and we're such a diverse country, and yet in rugby there's one more thing. It's provincialism. And it's sad to say, but my first 3 years I preferred playing at the Sharks. It just wasn't a great environment. And so how do you fix that? And Bryan's right. You get to a team room and you see a table full of bullseyes sitting together talking about hunting and khaki clothes. Then you've got all the Sharks folks talking about how big the waves were at Bronze Beach. Then all the Free State folks on one table talking about the latest tractor. Yeah. And then all the Stormers folks talking about hair products. And then the one Lions guy.
Making the jokes stop-free.
One Lions oak talking to himself.
So you've got to change it somehow. So we were a lot of senior oaks in that team that were young captains, but senior guys in their team. So just went to the 7 most experienced guys and said, okay, there's only one rule. And this is actually how it started. One rule, you can't sit on the same table twice. So you've got to mix breakfast, lunch, and supper, which you can imagine is a very important time for specifically the forwards. But you've got to mix, and you've got to sit at a different table every single time. So when these senior guys started integrating themselves, it's amazing how quickly that helped us create this green and gold vibe rather than a provincial vibe.
Have you ever thought of maybe doing an HR handbook? I mean, Jake White, Bucky's words of managerial oversight. I think you could have a bestseller on your hands there.
I've got managerial fatigue.
It was John mentioned it earlier, but Bryan, I'm going to direct this at you. In terms of staying at an elite level for a long period of time, we obviously, as fans, we get to watch a game. We see this finished product. We see the tries, we see the triumphs, the tribulations, but there's obviously thousands and thousands of hours behind the scenes that allowed you to get and remain at that level for such a long period of time. What are the core skills, what are the core habits that you guys had to develop and hone over a long period of time to remain there?
I think for me, and I've also now had the transition from sport to business, which is a pretty massive chasm to jump over. But I think, like what I have learned, I think there's sort of 5 non-negotiables in life if you want to be successful. The first one is discipline. Like if you don't have that, like no matter what you do in life, you're not gonna get to the end point. With discipline comes sacrifice, and I think a lot of times you say you don't see the hours. I think the convergence of success is where preparation and opportunity meet. And if you look at what Peregrine Capital have done, in the last 30-odd years, it's making sure that when that opportunity arrives, you're best prepared to capitalize on it. And I think the success in life is sometimes the sacrifice that goes unseen is probably the hardest thing to deal with because, John, with his second child, left, flew out of the country day of the birth or the day after the birth?
Just after.
The day after, right? So all of a sudden you go on a 3-week tour, you've only seen your child for 24 hours. The hours spent training when no one else is doing, I'll never forget, at university, I used to have a absolute piss up on a Wednesday night after the socials where I needed to learn how to windsurf and realize that I've got to get up at 4 o'clock the next morning to be in the gym at 6. So you're sacrificing something. And then, again, the hard work, the resilience, and the perseverance is a non-negotiable. I think with all that, I'm very much of the opinion to have a balanced life, if you want to be successful, is impossible. If you have 3 or 4 silos in your life and you give each silo the adequate time, you're potentially not giving a silo 66.666% reoccurring, right? So how you then become critically conducive to understanding where you're wanting to burn your gas and how you're wanting to be intentional in that silo. But it's those sort of 5 factors that for me people don't always see. They see the the joy on the field, but they don't. The unseen work is where the magic happens. And in life, you have to have this decision of which little fire are you burning, because you can't burn all fires simultaneously. And I think for us, it's a lot of times in the times of heartache. So I honestly believe if we hadn't gone through the struggles of 2006, chances of us winning the World Cup in 2007 wouldn't have happened, because we learned, firstly, so much about ourselves individually and so much about us as a team collectively to get there. But yeah, success is definitely not a balanced structure. And I think for all of us, you get to build on relationships, which become critically important. And when you've been in the trenches with someone that you trust with your life, you know that you're willing to fight to the nth degree to make that happen. So that would be my sort of
Fair enough.
element.
Good answer. Maybe just going back to the point earlier where it's sort of, and we've had as the Springboks, we've had quite a long history of having a successful coach win a World Cup, depart. New coach comes in, successful coach wins. So the continuity element hasn't been there previously. It's there now, obviously currently under kind of the Rassi regime. But to your point of innovation, how much of a factor do you think that continuity could or couldn't be in terms of, the success we've seen recently from the Springboks?
Well, I think without the continuity, you also don't have the privilege of learning what to burn. So you want to do certain things. Certain things work for you, and you hold on to them. And then you've got to ascertain what doesn't, and you burn those. And then you've got to learn from your position and see what you're going to bring in. And then you've got to think, okay, well, what is something that no one else has thought about? Now, there's a full sort of, you've got to answer those questions sort of internationally every 6 months.
Yeah.
So if you get a new coach, he's got none of that. He's only thinking about how to implement his strategy. And notoriously, he probably hasn't come from an international background, so he's experimenting. He's hoping that it works. And so you then have to go, okay, we're going to give this at least 2 or 3 or 4 years to be able to get to the stage where he can burn a few ideas, he's learned a little bit, and he's been able to innovate a few sort of scenarios. And so the consistency from an environment point of view needs a few things. It needs a group to buy in to the actual coach, the leader. And for that, he's got to show some genuineness. He's got to be hardworking. It was much easier to buy into strategies with coaches that spend more hours than you thinking about the game and analysis, and that makes a big difference. And then you need to win a few. You've got to buy the confidence, I guess, of the consumer, of the fan, and you've got to buy yourself time. So sometimes you have to park a little bit of innovation and creativity for a nuts and bolts win over a Georgia or over like a B team like in England or. And then you buy yourself some time. So it's very difficult to get all of those things right. You need a little bit of luck, but you need to have the buy-in of the team first. And the bus is always on a journey towards a version of success that the team decides, and that decision's made from the management. We sat with Jake the first time in Bloemfontein, and he stood up in front of the team, and we were just grateful to have made the team. That's how cuck we were. Like, we were in a dark place. 2003, only highlight was carte blanche with no kit on, So, and so you're sitting in this team room, and Jake stands up, and the first thing that he says is, in 4 years' time, we're going to have the William Webber Willis Cup in this team room. So it's hard. None of us had thought about that. Then, you hadn't even thought about the possibility of you being a world champion in 4 years' time. And so he pushes that level of belief out. We've got some work to do, but we can get there. But there's all these layers, and that takes time.
Fair enough. Looking at the modern game currently, it's obviously faster, slightly more complex, and significantly more scrutinized than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago. What do you think, from a leadership perspective, is important? I'm talking maybe more from a mentoring point of view than a captaincy perspective for young players coming into this environment. where there's just, I mean, the advent of social media can be so toxic on a young person's psyche.
Yeah.
I mean, like both of you have dealt with periods where the crowd goes against you. You know, the people that love you every week suddenly don't, and that's just revoltingly amplified
Yeah.
in this kind of world.
It's a hard question. I think it's probably hard because I didn't really have to delve into that space too much. I think social media was invented in 2009. Was it?
No, Facebook was out in 2004.
Yeah, but we weren't sitting on Facebook getting.
No,
But you could poke each other.
we're talking
you
to the
know?
wrong guy.
Remember
What
that?
the Stoke invented Twitter. So they do live in a different world to us, as do our kids, and I guess the pressures are different. You know, we had media to contend with. Now media is everyone, and everyone's got an opinion, and there's no one braver than someone behind a keyboard. You know, so it's a much more difficult bubble to create, and we always used to talk about this bubble of creating a bubble where you've picked certain people that you listen to, whose opinions that mean something, that have a credible background in the game or in your behavior, and that group you need to ask the hard questions to. But with social media, it's so easy to listen to everyone because when you play well, there's so many great messages and you want them all. But when you don't have such a lack of game, or you crash your car and you've done something untoward, then there's 1,000 voices telling you how badly you've buggered it up. So to try and my advice would be create a bubble that you trust, and understand one thing: you're under more scrutiny than we were. I mean, if there was social media in our time.
Geez, see the social media in Australia 2006, it would be.
We would have had significantly more administration to deal with.
So I, myself and Jake, we had a bit of a ebony and ivory relationship. I was always ebony, he was always ivory, and didn't mix. But we came back from Sydney 2006 after hammering in Sydney, and we'd been given the Sunday night off because we were only flying out to South Africa on the Monday. And we had a pretty large night, and got back home on the Tuesday, and I see Jake White phoning me.
Just remember, he said beforehand, if there's anyone that gets into shit, they're gone.
So I'm like, geez, Jake speaks to me in the team room, but Jake has never phoned me this. Like, so I can become captain or something. And I say, Coach, how you going? He goes, Bryan, what happened on Sunday night? I'm like, sorry, hello, Jake, how are you? He goes, what did John do on Sunday night? I'm like, no, obviously he's trying to protect the captain. Like, no, it's fine. We put him in a taxi. And did he do X, Y, and Z? I'm like, no, John didn't do that. Not knowing that our captain was in a lot of trouble, hanging out of a taxi in Sydney, shouting expletives that we're not going to say in front of this audience, but then had to be phoned by the coach to say, did I not tell you that the first person to cause cuck on Sunday is going to be out the team? John's like, kick him out, Jake. Who is it? It's you.
It's you.
Yeah, so I think it is, to John's point, we live in a very different time, and I think it is very difficult. The world is evolving, and I was sort of listening to Jacques and Justin and the guys talking on the panel there. I think the world is moving at a rate faster than it's ever moved before, and you obviously need to give yourself the opportunity to learn in this ever-evolving world. And I tell people, we didn't know what social media was. I mean, I went to gym for the first time ever when I was out of school at 18 years old. Now parents come up to me, their kids are doing video analysis at 13 years old, and they're asking me, like, how does their kid become a Springbok? And it's a very difficult question for me to answer because life almost seemed a lot simpler when we were younger. But to John's point, if you don't align yourself with people that can criticize you not to break you down but to build you up, can keep you accountable to what your values are, to where you need to go to, and be a voice of reasoning in a world where there's so much noise, it becomes extremely difficult. And I think we get asked quite a bit, who is the best coach you played under? And it's very much, where's our wine guy? It's a very subjective thing about coaching. Is it winning a World Cup, winning the Tri-Nations, beating the All Blacks in New Zealand that Peter de Villiers did 2 years in a row? And I tell people the best coach I played under was the one that selected me, because that one that selected me gave me the opportunity to go out there and make sure that the skill that I trained hours and hours for, I was executing. I didn't choose myself. I gave myself the best opportunity to be chosen, but that coach selected us. And I think in this world, to have that bubble that John's talking about becomes critically key for success, because it's so easy to get dragged into the noise in a world that is extremely volatile. You chat about how you want to bring your kids up in a world where the noise is constant. Social media, like my wife had to change the channel yesterday when the news was talking about a person being killed by 3 youngsters in the UK, and my 7-year-old was like, "What is that about?" And my wife couldn't get fast enough, So I think it's very difficult to give advice in today's world, but I think the one advice we can give is that as people where the world was very different 10, 15 years ago, if we're not willing to unlearn, to be able to learn a lot about the current noise, we're going to get lost in the noise even more so than what this current generation is going to be.
My advice would be the same advice I give my kids. Control your digital life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the problem with that is our children are not very good at listening to their parental advice.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
But you still got to say it.
Yeah, no, you can repeat it.
Yeah.
Repeat it, absolutely. But then remember 18-year-old John Smit and be like, would he have listened to this advice?
Every word.
Yeah. Every word. I'm going to phone your dad and check whether that was in fact the case. John, one question for you as a proud member of the Front Row Dark Arts Society. What's your view? Is he not a proud member? I think he's a very proud member.
I hated that dark arts. I looked at that thing every day and I was like, Jeepers Creepers, I'm so grateful to God that he did not bless me with that talent, that he put me at the back looking on.
No, it's so much fun.
No.
It is. But your view on kind of the depowering of scrums currently in rugby union?
I'm not so sure I share that view. I think that World Rugby's made scrumming is certainly safer.
Yeah.
And we'd be hard pressed as South Africans to say that it's been depowered because we mangle everyone in front of us. I think what we have been able to eradicate is far fewer collapse scrums. The whistle comes far quicker when there's a scrum that goes up. So, I'd hate to have to scrum in this day and age. I think it's harder now in terms of the pressure, but it's at least a little bit safer. But we look at South Africa, and again, this group has found ways to make sure that it is still an unbelievable weapon. And I'd shudder to say if it's a toss-up between our Hobbit wings that can catch anything out of the air and score tries from nothing, to our tight 5 that scrum everyone to pieces in front of them. You look at a guy like Sasha. Sasha's made the most amazing entry into World Rugby, but he must have had the easiest pathway than any fly-off in the history of the world, because he's played against the most powerful pack that has never gone backwards in 6 years. So he should go and do a few seasons at the Free State or the Griquas. That Ike will start dancing properly. He'll sidestep. But it's just incredible. This talent has entered into a group where we've got a pack of forwards that are just doing so well. So I don't think it's departed. I think we'll continue to find ways that will keep the scrum strong. World Rugby, I'm sure, will find a way to make the high ball safer. But I think the scrum is in as best a place as it's ever been.
Okay, good.
Except if you're Irish.
Yes.
Are there any Irish?
It wasn't so safe for them.
Not so safe for them.
It was fantastic.
Oh, it was so good.
It was.
It was so good.
So good. I think I'm running over time here, so someone's going to shout at me. But let me quickly ask you both a question unrelated to rugby. You've both traveled the world, you've played in different countries, you've spent time living in different countries. Both of you come back to South Africa. Bryan to Stellenbosch, John to Pretoria. It's niche, but it's good. But
there's not many gingers in Pretoria, so
no, 100%. There's not many English-speaking gingers in Pretoria, definitely not. But nonetheless, something's brought you guys back here. So I think just to wrap up, we've obviously had some positive stuff about South Africa, but what for each of you, and I'd like both of you to give me an answer, is the thing that you're most optimistic or the thing that pumps you up about this country the most?
Yes, I think we've got the most uniquely incredible place in the world, and I think you'd be amiss not to mention the problems, right? And the problems are amazing. But if you've lived on the other side of the world, I lived in France for 5.5 years. Jeepers creepers. If you think South Africans are rude, you don't ever get on a plane to France. They become famous for, we call it the pup wheel, the flat tire. So I think our boiling pot of diversity in this country and the resilience that we have as a nation is unbelievable. I think our SME and our private sector, yes, it's carrying this country by a thread, but it's carrying this country. But what we've been able to overcome, given our very unique history, pre-apartheid, in apartheid, post-apartheid, where no country in the world had like the load shedding run that we had, and yet we constantly come back to South Africa. In France, you had to fill your own car up with petrol. Like a petrol attendant smiles at you filling your car up with petrol. Cost of living in South Africa to anywhere else in the world, you're not going to get. Well, some of those moving to Stellenbosch, you're going to be very, very quickly widely awakened how expensive the country is when you come down to Cape Town. But cost of living in South Africa, you just can't beat it anywhere in the world. And I think, bar the weather, within a 2-hour diversity radius, you have such a wide variety of optionality. Like, the world is in a very volatile, very insecure place, and South Africa has so much passion, so much energy, and I think we're both fortunate that sport, gave us this avenue to experience South Africa in its best way possible. But I think our boiling pot of diversity and the passion that we have is something you don't find anywhere in the world, and it definitely drives me to be a lot more positive about how we can continuously be a change of good.
Okay.
I think my reason is a little bit less complex. I really dig holding on to a brandy next to a fire.
Fair enough.
And
there we go. That's the highbrow back wing, the forward answer. Thank you. Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, so the chaos is essentially how we put some of that.
Yeah. To be serious, there was a lot of reasons. We never went away to leave, so we always had this intention of coming back. But there was no ways we were ever going to raise our kids anywhere else. And we've been back since 2013. And it's been some interesting times since 2013. Sure. But I don't think I'm pretty sure we should all be as optimistic as we can be in terms of where South Africa's at the moment. And the coolest thing about getting a maths exam back when it says 42% is when your mate gets 32%,
True.
And we're in the world like that. South Africa is not too bad compared to all the other shit that's going on at the moment. So, no, we wanted our kids to grow up in South Africa, and we wanted to be a part of the future.
Awesome. It's a good place to end off. Thank you guys. Really appreciate your time. It's been lovely having you back.
Thanks, Al.
Cheers, boys.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you.